Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our brief discussion to talk about the connection between environment, race, and place in Pittsburgh. My name is Megan Stanley. I'm the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. We are the city's official civil rights agency. We investigate complaints of discrimination, and we also provide outreach and education on human and civil rights. In the past year, we have partnered with the CMU Create Lab to have a data-driven approach to issues such as housing, health, the environment, and access to public services. Healthy and safe environments should be a human right and not a measure of privilege. I'm joined today with Dr. Jamil Bey of the Urbankind Institute.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jamil Bey of the Urbankind Institute. The Urbankind Institute is a think and do tank. We are a group of researchers who do applied social science research with and on behalf of community organizations. We have a particular lens on equity, environment, and justice. And one of our projects that we work on is the Pittsburgh Study, which is an initiative of the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh in partnership with the University of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and a host of community partners, including Urbankind. At the Pittsburgh Study, we're trying to learn from communities and community organizations how to understand how children and young people in those neighborhoods are thriving and how we can help as a society to remove the barriers to thriving. We want to make sure that every young person is able to become their best self.
Great, thanks, Jamil. As I mentioned, we're using a lot of data and mapping, I think all of us collectively, to better understand social inequity and the impact of where people live and how that affects their lives. So I want to just go ahead and share with you some of the maps that we're using to guide our discussion here. So the first thing that we're looking at is just the US race map for Pittsburgh. This is as of the 2010 census, so it might change a little bit. But essentially every small dot you see is a person, and then it's color-coded by race. So we predominantly see here a lot of blue dots, which are for white persons. Green dots would identify as Black. The orange or yellow would be Hispanic or Latino. Red would be Asian, and the brown would be other races or multiracial. And so we can see sort of housing patterns here. Jamil, what has your work thus far shown you about where people live and what neighborhoods mean to them?
So we understand that neighborhoods and people's connections to places like their neighborhoods, they easily become a part of their identity. Most people talk about the neighborhood or the place in which they grew up, with a whole lot of pride. And we see that in Pittsburgh. Most folks are proud of their neighborhoods and they, claim that as their identity long, even if they move out of that neighborhood. But in many of these places, particularly neighborhoods where we see a lot of Black residents, these are places that have been disinvested for years. Public policies like redlining and predatory and discriminatory lending have all contributed to places that do not have the access to many desirable resources or amenities that you see in other places.
So one of the things that I want to look at here is just the overall benefit of trees. So Pittsburgh has a 42% tree coverage rate, but we know that those trees aren't spread evenly across all 90 neighborhoods in the city. And so what this map is showing is just the overall benefits of trees that are maintained specifically by the city of Pittsburgh. So this is not every tree. A lot of these are the roadside trees. And what you see is there are areas in red and orange here and yellow that have lower benefits. And by benefits, we mean additions to property value, pollution control, improving air quality, and also stormwater runoff. And then you see large areas of green. A lot of these are big public park systems. But again, those are concentrated sort of to the east of Pittsburgh. And so there's also this tree finder app that the city has where you can see where different trees are located and look at the benefit of them. You can even drill down to an exact address and find all of the benefits and the types of trees that are there. Again, though, that's not done and distributed equitably. Jamil, can you talk about the importance of trees and what the Pittsburgh study has looked at with this?
Sure. So trees and adequate tree cover provide tremendous benefit for neighborhoods. I mean, they keep temperatures down, as you mentioned. Trees absorb stormwater, they prevent landslides, they clean the air of many pollutants, and they're habitats for all kinds of important birds and small mammals and insects that are beneficial to our ecology. I mean, so the list goes on and on. As you mentioned, many of these neighborhoods, especially the ones where Black populations live, they do not have adequate tree cover. And so let's look at how this plays out. So here in the city's South Hilltop neighborhoods, these are the stacks that vent the Liberty tunnels. Every day, between 40 to 50,000 vehicles travel through those tunnels. All of that pollution is vented in the middle of the neighborhood and in a neighborhood with little tree cover. So as a result, the three neighborhoods downwind from these tunnels, Allentown, Belts Hoover, and Knoxville, these three neighborhoods have the highest childhood asthma hospitalization rate in the city. And they're third highest in the county behind Clairton and Braddock, where children in those neighborhoods are exposed to poisons from U.S. Steel's plants in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, and speaking of that asthma rate, we have this other map that shows not the asthma rates necessarily, but children who are utilizing the healthcare system for at least one acute asthma doctor visit per year. And so essentially these areas that are green are about 5%. That's trending with national averages. So the green is sort of the status quo. When you're looking at red, instead of 5%, you're looking at up to 15 or 16%, so 3 times as much. And when we look at these rates and we compare them to that race map from before, what stands out to you about this, Jamil?
Well, immediately we see that there's an ugly relationship between where Black people live and the neighborhoods that have the highest rate of childhood asthma hospitalizations.
Yeah, and is the Pittsburgh study looking into any of these measures or talking to communities about what this means?
So at the study, we're trying to look behind this aggregated data that is on these maps and trying to see and show how place matters. I mean, so when it comes to the lived experience and individual incomes, if we can do that, we can help to remove some of those barriers and try to find some bright spots in some of those neighborhoods for things that are working and things that are removing those barriers so that kids can thrive. So a map like this shows us that inside of these spaces, we have a lot of work to do. Race and income are not determinants of asthma or asthma rates. Sadly, they are predictors though. And that's because, our policies that establish these housing or residential patterns persist.
Absolutely.
But not only this though, it's not only outdoor air quality, there's bad indoor air quality. And so this pandemic, and the shelter in place orders connected to social distancing actions have shown us that our outdoor environments matter just as much as our indoor environment, especially in areas where there are fewer outdoor green spaces.
Absolutely. And at the commission, we see a lot of complaints of discrimination in housing that are related to disability. And a lot of those are people who in their homes are being exposed to toxins, to black mold, to things that could be controlled but aren't, and that are exacerbating their existing disabilities or health conditions. And ultimately, that means that the most vulnerable populations we see end up bearing the brunt of these issues and are increasingly more vulnerable over time. What issues do you see affecting indoor environments the most, and is the study looking at any of those?
So related to climate change, we have more intense rainstorms. Add to that these areas that have not been invested in, don't have adequate stormwater management infrastructure or adequate tree cover. We have water entering homes. This triggers additional mold growth, and that triggers more asthma and more hospitalization visits. But we also see lead and lead dust in older homes, open windows in areas near these high polluting plants bring in more of the toxins, like from the Liberty tunnels, from the highways, and from U.S. Steel's poison plants.
Absolutely. And again, I think when we look at these maps, we see again and again that low income and communities of color are the ones who end up having to deal with more of these issues than anybody else. So thank you for that framing. I'm sure people are wondering what they can do next to get involved as we kick off Earth Week.
Well, there are lots of ways to get involved. Visit the Pittsburgh Studies website and Google, you can Google it. But, we're planning an upcoming public meeting to bring in additional community partners. Also, you can get involved in your own neighborhood. one of the many organizations, Tree Pittsburgh, Grow Pittsburgh, the Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers. There are plenty of organizations in Pittsburgh and many that are active in your neighborhood. They're always looking for volunteers and supporters.
Absolutely. And if you don't have a neighborhood association where you live, this is a great time to get one started and start some coalition building so that all 90 neighborhoods are equally represented. I would also say, equitable investment by governments is really important. Community development block grant money is meant to help low to moderate income communities. And we want to make sure that people in the community have a voice in budgeting. I would urge people to work towards participatory budgeting, where they are saying, City of Pittsburgh, this is how we want you to spend money, and this is what we want to see in our communities. And it's also, I think, really important to address habitability standards and what those look like in housing. So thank you, Jamil, for all of your sentiments, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and happy 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
Thank you.